Writers are often told that smell is the most powerful sense to deploy in fiction. The instruction gets passed forward without examination. Workshop leaders repeat it. Craft books assert it. New writers start reaching for candles and rain and old wood whenever they want emotional weight. The neuroscience behind the claim is real, but what it actually shows is narrower than what writers have been taught. And understanding the difference will change how you work. This masterclass covers what sensory detail actually does in fiction, how to deploy it through a character's consciousness rather than dropping it as decoration, and a framework for understanding why some sensory details are reliable across all readers and others are a wager. The neuroscience is real. Research confirms that olfaction has a direct neural pathway to the hippocampus, the brain's center for memory and emotional processing. Vision, hearing, and touch all reroute through an intermediary as the human neocortex expanded during evolution. Smell alone kept its direct access. The result is that smell-triggered memories tend to be older, more emotionally charged, and more vivid when they occur. What research does not show? Placing a smell description on a page does not produce reader emotional response. A reader encountering the word wood smoke is processing language, not activating olfactory pathways. Whatever response that word produces depends entirely on the reader's stored experience with that smell, how specific the description is, and whether the detail is filtered through a character or dropped in as atmosphere. The same room smells, sounds, looks, and feels different depending on who is in it and what they are carrying. A woman returning to her childhood home after her mother's death and a real estate agent walking the same house for the first time are standing in identical space. They are not having identical experiences. Every sensory detail passes through a consciousness that has a history, a wound, a wish, an expectation. The detail is never neutral. It is always inflected by who is receiving it. Sensory detail that passes through the character's consciousness does narrative work. It tells us what this person notices, which tells us what they value, fear, remember, or cannot stop thinking about. It delivers setting and interiority at the same time. It grounds the scene in a body rather than in a camera. Sensory detail dropped in as atmosphere as decoration. The writer has observed the room and reported its contents. The character is absent from the transaction. Consider the difference between these two versions. Version 1. The kitchen smelled of coffee and old wood. Morning light came through the yellow curtains. A clock ticked on the wall. Version 2. The kitchen smelled the way it always had, and she stood in the doorway for a moment before she could make herself go in. The first version describes a room. The second version describes a person standing at the edge of something she is not ready for. The reader does not need to be told what the kitchen smells like. They need to know what it costs her to smell it. The foundational question to ask of every sensory detail in your fiction: whose nervous system is this passing through, and what does it mean to them? Not all sensory responses work the same way in readers. There are 3 distinct layers, and each requires different handling from the writer. The hardwired layer. Some sensory responses are evolutionary inheritance. They do not require cultural learning or personal experience. The sight of blood triggers a threat response before the conscious mind has identified what it is seeing. A sudden loud sound produces startle before the brain locates the source. Extreme temperature. The sensation of falling. The nervous system responds to these automatically before choice enters the transaction. These responses are as close to universal as sensory experience gets. Use the hardwired layer when you need the reader's body to react before their mind catches up. The culturally encoded layer. A second layer is learned within a culture and widely shared among its members, but is not universal across all cultures. Red is the clearest example. Red commands attention at the hardwired level because it is the color of blood and fire. Every culture has built on that biological foundation, but what they built differs. In Western cultures, red encodes danger and urgency. The same cultures encode red as passion and romantic love. In Chinese culture, red encodes luck and celebration, a divergence that reflects a different cultural history built on the same biological base. Culturally encoded responses are broadly reliable within your likely readership, but they require cultural awareness. The same sensory detail can carry opposite meanings across cultural contexts, and assuming universality where encoding diverges is a failure of craft. The personally encoded layer. The third layer is what the Proust effect research actually documents. These responses are idiosyncratic and entirely outside the writer's control. The smell of a specific cleaning product that one reader associates with a beloved grandmother and another associates with a hospital. A sound that unlocks joy in one reader and grief in another, depending entirely on what was happening in their lives when that sound first entered them. Personally encoded responses carry the highest emotional payoff when the key finds its lock and the highest variance. The writer cannot manufacture them. The only tool available is precision, being specific enough that readers who carry the matching experience recognize it and walk through the door it opens. Knowing which layer you are working in changes your strategy. Hardwired responses are reliable. Reach for them when you need the nervous system to respond without asking permission. Culturally encoded responses are broadly reliable, but use them with cultural awareness. Personally encoded responses are a wager. Accept the variance and pay the price of precision. Sensory detail does not create emotion in the reader. It creates the conditions for the reader to access emotion they already carry. If sensory detail created emotion, any description would produce the same response in every reader. It does not. A reader whose grandmother baked bread every Sunday and a reader who grew up in a house where bread was never made will not have identical responses to the same sentence. The writer cannot manufacture the emotional response. The writer can only find the detail specific enough and position precisely enough through a character's consciousness that readers who carry the matching experience recognize it and walk through the door it opens. The writer cannot control what the reader carries. The writer can only control the precision of the key. Generic sensory detail almost never works. It cannot find a lock because it is not specific enough to be a key. Generic: the room smelled like flowers. Specific: the room smelled like the carnations her aunt always kept in a vase by the sink, a smell she associated with afternoon visits and things left unsaid. The generic version names a category. The specific version names an experience. The first asks nothing of the reader. The second asks whether the reader has a carnation memory of their own, and if they do, the detail lands with weight the generic version could never produce. This applies equally across all 5 senses. Not light coming through a window, but the way the light hit the floor at that angle in late October, the kind of light that always made her feel something was ending. Not a dog barking outside, but the pattern of it, 3 short barks and then silence, the way he had learned to listen for what came after the silence. The sense hierarchy does not matter. The precision does. Each sense has distinct properties as a narrative tool. The correct sense to deploy in any given moment is the one that best serves that moment's work. Sight establishes space and orientation. The dominant sense in most fiction, and the easiest to over-rely on until it becomes invisible. Use it for what only sight delivers: distance, light quality, the way things are arranged in relation to each other. Sound creates time and urgency. It operates in duration rather than space. A sound in a scene introduces change because it arrived from somewhere. Sound is also the most effective sense for establishing the presence of things the character cannot see. Touch grounds the reader in a body. The hardest sense to experience from emotional distance. A character described touching something, or being touched, is a character the reader inhabits rather than watches. Smell carries the emotional charge the research documents, but only when earned through specificity and positioned inside a character's consciousness. Used at the level of precision it demands, it is powerful. Used casually, it signals a writer who heard it was powerful without understanding why. Taste arrives rarely and lands hard. Its scarcity in fiction is itself a tool. One precise taste detail in a scene that has not otherwise used taste is a sensory event. Reserve it for moments of intensity, intimacy, or irreversibility. 6 common sensory failures. Read these as a checklist for revision. Most writers recognize themselves in at least 2. 1. The atmospheric dump. A catalog of sensory details that orients the reader in the setting without putting the reader inside a consciousness. The room is described. The character is absent. The reader knows where they are and nothing about what it costs to be there. 2. The generic reach. 5 senses present. None specific enough to find a lock. Presence without precision. The scene smells of something, sounds like something, and none of it names a real experience. 3. The smell crutch. Smell deployed because writers have been told it is the most powerful sense, without doing the specificity and character filter work that makes it powerful. The research supports using smell with great care. It does not support using it frequently or easily. 4. The layer confusion. Treating a culturally encoded response as universal, or a personally encoded detail as culturally reliable. Red means stop in one room and celebration in another. Know which layer you are working in. 5. The missing body. A character who sees and smells and hears but does not have a nervous system. No physical reactions, no interiority filtering the sensory experience. The reader receives the world but has no one to inhabit while receiving it. 6. The sense hierarchy error. Organizing sensory deployment around a fixed ranking rather than asking what this specific moment, filtered through this specific character, actually requires. The hierarchy produces interchangeable scenes. The character filter question produces scenes that could only belong to this story. Of all the craft principles in this masterclass, the one most writers are missing is the simplest to name and the hardest to fake. The reader does not live in the room. The reader lives in the body of the character standing in the room. Take any scene of emotional intensity in your current project and read it looking only for physical reactions, the involuntary responses, the places where the body moves before the mind catches up, the moments where sensation outpaces comprehension. If the scene has few or none, the character is not fully present in their own body. The nervous system is where the reader lives. Put your character fully inside theirs, and the reader follows. The companion power tool for this masterclass covers the full 3-layer framework in detail, the complete profile of each sense as a narrative tool, all 6 common failures with extended analysis, 8 diagnostic questions, and 6 targeted exercises. It is a free download at fictionbrain.com. Everything on the site is free. No paywall, no subscription. Just craft, ready when you need it.